Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a story that's packed with, well, conflict and intrigue and even, maybe even some parallels to today's world.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we're looking at the events surrounding Paul's arrest and the plot against his life. All this is described in Acts 23 of the New King James Version of the Bible.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we know our listeners are, well, they're really fascinated by this part of Paul's journey.
Right.
So we're going to unpack it all for you, see how these events reflect some broader historical and religious themes.
Yeah, when you mention parallels to today's world, it really strikes me that what we see in Acts 23 is, well, it's like a microcosm,
Yeah.
of these power struggles that just keep repeating throughout history, especially when religious beliefs clash with political realities.
That's a great point. And, speaking of power struggles, we find Paul on trial before the Jewish council.
Right.
He's facing all these accusations, yet he stands firm, proclaiming his innocence and his unwavering faith.
Yeah, it's an incredibly tense scene.
It is. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty of Paul's trial, can you maybe set the stage for us?
Sure.
Who was this council and why were they so powerful?
So this wasn't just any ordinary gathering. The Jewish Council, also known as the Sanhedrin, they functioned as the Supreme Court for Jewish, religious, and civil matters, all under Roman rule.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine a body that combined the authority of, say, the Supreme Court with the influence of a religious council.
That's a powerful combination.
It is.
Yeah.
They had the power to interpret Jewish law, to settle disputes, and even impose punishments, although their authority was, of course, limited under Roman rule.
Right, right. So Paul is standing before this powerful body, knowing the stakes are high, but he doesn't back down.
No, he doesn't.
In fact, he kind of uses his knowledge of the council to his advantage.
He does.
He throws a wrench in their plans by bringing up the different beliefs of the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
He's a master strategist. He knew the council was, well, deeply divided between these two factions. You see, the Pharisees believed in the resurrection of the dead,
Okay.
while the Sadducees, they vehemently rejected it.
Oh, wow.
And Paul, being a Pharisee himself, he cleverly invoked his belief in the resurrection, knowing it would ignite a firestorm of debate.
It's like he's playing 4D chess. He
Yeah.
anticipates their reactions and turns their own internal conflict into his shield.
Exactly.
But can you give us a bit more background on these groups, the Pharisees and the Sadducees? What was their role in Judean society, and how did their relationship with Rome, how did that add another layer of complexity to all of this?
Okay, so imagine Judea as this pressure cooker just simmering with tension, right?
Okay.
The Pharisees, they were often seen as the more populist group,
Okay.
upholding strict adherence to Jewish law and tradition.
I see.
But at the same time, they were also more open to adapting to changing circumstances.
Right.
They saw Roman rule as a temporary setback. They believed that strict adherence to the law would eventually lead to their liberation.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how they fit into the picture. What about the Sadducees? How do they view Roman rule?
The Sadducees, they were often associated with the priestly aristocracy.
Okay.
They were more pragmatic, more willing to collaborate with Rome to maintain their power and influence.
I see.
They were generally wealthier and had, well, more to lose from any kind of upheaval, right? They often viewed the Pharisees' messianic hopes with suspicion,
Oh, wow.
seeing them as a threat to this fragile peace that they had negotiated with Rome.
So by bringing up the resurrection, Paul basically throws a grenade into this already volatile mix.
Exactly.
And it works. The council erupts into chaos. But even with this division, Paul's not out of the woods yet, is he?
No, he isn't. A group of Jews hatches this chilling plan to silence him permanently.
Oh, man. This is where it gets really intense.
Yeah. The text describes over 40 Jews conspiring to assassinate Paul. They even take an oath to fast until their mission is accomplished.
Wow, that's beyond intense. What could possibly drive them to such extremes? Was it simply because of Paul's conversion and his preaching to the Gentiles? Or was there more to the story?
Well, while Paul's conversion and mission were definitely central to their animosity, it's important to remember that he was originally a fierce persecutor of Christians.
Right.
Someone who had inflicted immense pain and suffering on the very community he now embraced.
So there's a layer of betrayal there.
Right.
A sense of outrage that this former persecutor is now seen as a leader within the very movement he once sought to destroy.
Exactly. And don't forget the the political implications, Paul's message, with its focus on salvation for all, including Gentiles, threatened to, well, to upend the existing social and religious order.
Right.
It challenged the power dynamics, not just within the Jewish community, but also within the broader Roman Empire.
So we have this complex web of motives: religious zeal, personal vendetta, and this fear of the disruption Paul's message might cause. And in the middle of all this, Paul's life hangs precariously in the balance.
Yes.
What happens next? Does this plot succeed?
Thankfully for Paul, no. His nephew gets wind of this deadly scheme,
Oh, wow.
and he rushes to warn his uncle, knowing time is of the essence. And Paul, always quick on his feet, he immediately uses his status as a Roman citizen to appeal for protection from the Roman commander Claudius Lysias.
That's incredible. Talk about thinking under pressure. But wouldn't it have been easier to just, disappear, go into hiding? Why risk appealing to the Roman authorities?
Well, that's where Paul's deep understanding of Roman law comes in.
Oh, I see.
He knew that as a Roman citizen, he was entitled to certain legal protections. He couldn't just be arbitrarily arrested or executed without a proper trial. By appealing to Lysias, he was essentially forcing the Romans to intervene
Okay.
to protect him from the Jewish mob and ensure his safety.
So this move wasn't just about survival, it was also about strategy. He's using the system, the very system that once oppressed him, to his advantage. What was Lysias's reaction?
Lysias, realizing how serious the situation was and the potential consequences if a Roman citizen were harmed under his watch, acts swiftly and decisively.
Okay.
He mobilizes a heavy guard and arranges for Paul to be transferred to Felix, the Roman governor in Caesarea, for safekeeping.
Caesarea, now that was a major Roman city, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little more about it? What was the role of a Roman governor, someone like Felix, in this complex power structure?
Imagine Caesarea as this bustling hub of Roman power and culture. It was a strategically important port city,
Okay.
a melting pot of diverse populations, and the administrative capital of Roman Judea.
Wow.
Think vibrant marketplaces, imposing Roman architecture, and a constant flow of people and goods from all corners of the empire.
So Paul is whisked away to Caesarea, leaving behind the chaos and danger of Jerusalem. But what about the commander, Lysias? Does he just let this whole assassination plot slide?
Not quite. Lysias understands Roman bureaucracy and the importance of covering his bases. He writes a letter to Felix, carefully detailing the events surrounding Paul's arrest.
This letter is a key piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
Why is that? What's so important about this letter?
This letter isn't just a dry report of the facts. It's
Right.
a strategic piece of political maneuvering designed to protect Lysias while ensuring Paul's safety. Let's dive into the letter's contents and unpack its hidden layers in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're right in the thick of it now, following Paul's journey from those volatile streets of Jerusalem to the relative safety of Caesarea, under the watchful eye of Governor Felix. We left off with Commander Lysias sending this carefully crafted letter to Felix,
Right.
explaining the circumstances of Paul's arrest.
Yes.
So let's delve into that letter.
Yeah.
What's Lysias's angle here? Is he just throwing the Jewish council under the bus to save his own skin?
It's a little more nuanced than that. You have to remember Lysias is a seasoned Roman official.
Right.
He's not going to outright accuse the Jewish council, especially knowing that delicate balance of power in Judea.
Okay.
Instead, he frames the events in a way that highlights his own, swift action
Right.
and subtly shifts the blame onto the Jewish mob for all the chaos.
I see.
It's like masterclass in Roman political maneuvering.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What exactly does he say in this letter? Does he paint Paul as, an innocent lamb caught in the crossfire?
He's more subtle than that. He starts by emphasizing Paul's Roman citizenship,
Uh-huh.
a detail he conveniently omits mentioning earlier in the story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this detail immediately raises the stakes for Felix,
Okay.
reminding him of the potential consequences if a Roman citizen were harmed under his watch.
Ah, so he's subtly reminding Felix that, mishandling this situation could have some serious repercussions for both of them.
Precisely. Lysias then goes on to describe how he rescued Paul from a Jewish mob
Okay.
that was about to kill him.
Oh, wow.
He paints this really vivid picture of the chaos, subtly implying that the Jewish authorities had lost control of the situation.
So he's putting the Jewish council in a bad light without directly accusing them of any wrongdoing.
Exactly. Clever, isn't it?
Clever. But what about the accusations against Paul? How does Lysias address those?
That's where his political savvy really shines.
Okay.
He downplays the seriousness of the accusations, describing them as mere questions of their law,
Hmm.
suggesting internal Jewish disputes rather than, any serious crimes against Rome.
That's an interesting interpretation. Some might argue that Lysias is intentionally downplaying the accusations to protect himself,
Right.
knowing that any hint of rebellion or sedition would require a much more thorough investigation,
Of course.
potentially exposing his own initial mishandling of the whole situation.
That's a valid point. We can't know for sure what was going through Lysias's mind,
Right.
but what's undeniable is that his letter successfully frames the situation in a way that benefits both him and Paul, at least in the short term. By presenting the accusations as, minor religious squabbles,
Uh-huh.
he effectively neutralizes the threat Paul poses to Roman authority
Okay.
and allows Felix to deal with the matter as an internal Jewish affair.
So Lysias very deftly navigates this political minefield,
He does.
ensuring Paul's safety while simultaneously safeguarding his own career.
Right.
It's a fascinating example of how individuals can manipulate even these seemingly rigid systems to their advantage.
Yeah, it is.
But what does this mean for Paul?
Yeah.
He's now at the mercy of Felix, the
Mhm.
man known for his ruthlessness.
That's the million-dollar question. Lysias might have bought Paul some time
Right.
and a more formal legal process,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also placed him in the hands of a man who wasn't exactly known for his fairness or impartiality.
This Felix character sounds like a real piece of work.
He does, doesn't he?
What do we know about him?
History paints a rather unflattering portrait of Antonius Felix, the Roman procurator of Judea.
Okay.
He was notorious for his corruption, his cruelty, and his penchant for using his position for personal gain.
Oh, man.
Think of him as a Roman-appointed strongman ruling with an iron fist and little regard for justice or the well-being of his subjects.
So not exactly the ideal person to have, judging your case, what happens when Paul arrives in Caesarea. Is he thrown into some, dank Roman dungeon to await his fate?
Not exactly a dungeon,
Yeah.
but certainly a place that reflects the power dynamics at play.
Okay.
The text tells us that Paul is held in Herod's Praetorium,
Mm-hmm.
this grand palace built by Herod the Great, now used as the governor's official residence and administrative headquarters.
Wow. So even in custody, Paul is housed in relative luxury.
Right.
It's a strange juxtaposition, isn't it?
It is.
A man accused of inciting rebellion confined within the very walls of Roman power.
It speaks to the complexities of Paul's situation.
It does.
While he's technically a prisoner, his Roman citizenship affords him a certain level of protection and dignity,
Okay.
even within the confines of Roman authority. He's not just any prisoner. He's a Roman citizen accused of religious crimes, which presented Felix with a unique challenge.
So Paul is in Caesarea waiting for his accusers to arrive and his trial to begin.
Yes.
But we still don't know the specific charges against him.
Right.
We're told it's about questions of their law, but what does that even mean?
Right.
And what are Paul's chances of getting a fair hearing before a governor like Felix?
That's where the real intrigue begins. The stage is set for a clash of ideologies, a battle of wits between a skilled orator and a man who seems to hold Paul's fate in his hands.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on this journey with Paul, from that dramatic arrest in Jerusalem
Right.
to his transfer to Caesarea,
Yeah.
and now he's awaiting trial before Governor Felix.
It is a real cliffhanger.
It is. So the big question is, what happens next?
Mm.
Do Paul's accusers finally, reveal the specific charges against him?
They do. The text tells us that the accusers arrive from Jerusalem led by this skilled orator named Tertullus. Imagine this scene, a Roman courtroom. With Felix presiding, the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife.
Wow.
Tertullus steps forward and launches into this, carefully crafted speech,
Right.
painting Paul as this dangerous troublemaker, a ringleader of a rebellious sect and a threat to the peace of the Roman Empire.
So they're really laying it on thick, trying to play on Felix's fears,
Yeah,
of unrest and rebellion.
absolutely.
But remember, Felix is a shrewd politician.
Right.
Do you think he just took their word for it?
Not at all. Felix, despite his reputation for ruthlessness, was no fool.
Okay.
He knew that Judea was this tinderbox of religious and political tensions.
Right.
And he wasn't about to make a rash decision based solely on the accusations of Paul's enemy, so he allowed Paul to speak in his own defense.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
I was starting to get a little worried there that Paul wouldn't get a fair chance to tell his side of the story.
Yeah.
What was Paul's defense like? Did he maintain his boldness, Or did he kind of tone it down knowing he was dealing with a Roman governor?
Paul, always the master communicator,
Right.
sees this opportunity to present his case with eloquence and conviction.
Okay.
He systematically refuted each accusation point by point,
Huh.
demonstrating that he had not instigated any riots or violated any Roman laws.
Okay.
He acknowledged his belief in Jesus as the Messiah, but he framed it within the context of Jewish hope and prophecy,
Okay, I see.
carefully emphasizing that his faith posed no threat to Roman authority or public order.
So smart.
He even subtly appealed to Felix's own sense of justice and fairness.
That's incredible. He's walking a tightrope,
He is.
affirming his faith while simultaneously appealing to Roman sensibilities.
Right.
Do we have any accounts of Felix's reactions during Paul's defense? Did he seem convinced, or was he just, playing his cards close to his chest?
The text unfortunately doesn't give us a detailed account of Felix's emotional responses. It focuses more on the content of Paul's defense
Right.
and the legal arguments involved.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that despite hearing both sides of the story, Felix doesn't immediately pronounce a judgment.
Oh, really?
Instead, he opts to defer his decision,
Hmm.
choosing to keep Paul in custody.
After that eloquent defense, Paul is still a prisoner.
Yeah.
Why would Felix do that? Was it purely a political calculation, or was there something else going on?
It's a complex situation
That is-
with multiple layers.
Right.
On the one hand, Felix was undoubtedly aware of the political ramifications of his decision.
Yeah.
Condemning Paul would appease the Jewish authorities,
Mm-hmm.
but it could spark unrest among Paul's followers.
Right.
Acquitting Paul would anger the powerful Jewish leadership and risk further instability in the region.
So he's caught between a rock and a hard place, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly.
Delaying a decision lets him avoid making a politically risky choice, at least for the time being.
Yes.
It's a classic tactic of those in power, isn't it? Just avoid making tough decisions and hope the problem goes away on its own.
It certainly seems that way, but there might be more to it.
Okay.
The text hints that Felix was also genuinely intrigued by Paul and his teachings.
Oh, interesting.
It mentions that Felix summoned Paul on numerous occasions,
Mhm.
engaging him in conversations, hoping to gain further insights into the way, meaning Christianity.
Okay.
Remember, this was a time when Roman society was increasingly fascinated by Eastern religions and philosophies.
Right.
Perhaps Felix saw in Paul a window into this new and intriguing faith.
So we have this powerful Roman governor, a man known for his ruthlessness, engaging in deep conversations with a prisoner.
Right.
It's almost like a scene from a philosophical dialogue.
It does, and it speaks volumes about Paul's charisma and the power of his message, even in the face of adversity. He managed to captivate the attention of a Roman governor,
Wow.
transforming his prison into a platform for sharing the gospel.
What an incredible testament to the power of conviction.
It is.
But sadly, despite these intriguing conversations, Felix never actually makes a ruling on Paul's case, does he?
No, despite Paul's hopes for a swift resolution, his case remains unresolved under Felix's governorship. The text suggests that Felix was hoping Paul would offer him a bribe for his release,
Right.
which would have aligned perfectly with Felix's reputation for corruption.
That's both fascinating and disheartening.
It is, isn't it?
Fascinating because it provides a glimpse into the corrupt underbelly of Roman administration, and disheartening because it reveals how easily justice could be manipulated by those in power. It makes you wonder, if Paul had been willing to play the game to offer a bribe, would his fate have been different?
That's a question that has intrigued scholars and theologians for centuries.
Did he have?
We can only speculate about what might have been.
Right.
But what's undeniable is that Paul, despite facing immense pressure and uncertainty, never wavered in his faith or compromised his principles.
Yeah?
He used his time in custody to continue preaching and sharing his message, even to those who held his fate in their hands.
It's an inspiring example of resilience and unwavering faith in the face of adversity.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the events of Acts 23, what are some key takeaways we can glean from this dramatic episode in Paul's life?
Well, this story, though, set in ancient Judea, resonates across time and cultures. It reminds us that even amidst injustice, uncertainty, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the power of conviction and the unwavering pursuit of truth can have a profound impact.
Yeah.
Paul's story also encourages us to critically examine the systems and power structures that shape our own lives,
Right.
urging us to challenge those who abuse their authority and advocate for a more just and equitable world.
It's a powerful message, one that transcends the historical context and speaks directly to the challenges we face in our own lives.
Yes.
We often find ourselves navigating complex systems, facing obstacles that seem insurmountable, wrestling with questions of justice and fairness.
Right.
Paul's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope and truth can prevail,
Yes.
and that even the most seemingly insignificant actions can ripple outward, creating positive change.
And if we connect this to your initial interest in the parallels between Paul's story and our world today,
Yes.
it raises a crucial question, knowing how Paul used his understanding of religious and political structures to his advantage. How can we become more aware of the systems and power structures that surround us in our own lives? How can we use our voices, our knowledge, and our convictions to make a positive impact on the world, even in small, seemingly insignificant ways?
That's a really thought-provoking question, one that challenges us to reflect on our own roles and responsibilities in shaping a better future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Acts 23. We hope you gained some valuable insights, sparked some new questions, and maybe even found some inspiration for your own journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.